Well, let's get more on this with Emmanuel Dupuy, President of the Institute for European Perspective and Security, and he joins us live now from Paris. Michel Barnier, then, certainly experienced, certainly savvy. Were you surprised by his appointment, and do you think he's the man for the job?
Well, no, it was a half of a surprise since his name has been running for a long period of time, way before the negotiation which took place during the last week in the Élysée. Michel Barnier was even proposed before Gabriel Attal was nominated prime minister more than 6 months ago. His name has always been on the table. He has been a negotiator for the Brexit. You mentioned that. He has been a minister for the last president since he was minister, as the exception of Hollande, minister during the Mitterrand, the first cohabitation during François Mitterrand presidency, Mitterrand minister for Chirac, minister for Sarkozy. So he's a very long-running and very known politician in the French policy. And he was, I should quote, Macron compatible with the President of the Republic, since he is a European, or at least abiding by a more engagement of the French government in regards to that. And as it was mentioned by the President Speaker Pascal Perrineau, he was 2 times European Commissioner. He was a European MP, and therefore his nomination has 2 messages. First message, to try to convince the European that amongst the weakened French political agenda, there needs to be more stability. The second agenda, and of course this is very preoccupying situation, as the European Union has launched a procedure in concerning the excessive deficit of France, more than 5.6% of our GDP. And the second message is a message of compromise, a message of coalition, a message of a cooperation amongst the political forces, which have not been able to run, each of them, extreme right, extreme center, and extreme left, after the 7th of July anticipated election.
Just as you're speaking to us, Emmanuel, we're watching the handover of the prime ministers at the Élysée Palace. I mean, one of the challenges he's going to have to confront straight away is how to form a government. How difficult is that going to be?
Well, the passation, as you mentioned, in Matignon Palace, the house of the prime minister, shows precisely all the difficulty of the exercise. You have on one side the youngest prime minister, Gabriel Attal, 35 years old. You have on the right side the oldest prime minister, Michel Barnier, 73 years old. Experiences are diverse, policies will be different, and therefore there needs to be, as I mentioned, a compromise. And this compromise needs to have 3 pillars. First pillar, to take in consideration that the policy that was proposed by Emmanuel Macron since 2017 and 2022-21, when he was re-elected, are no longer accurate, or at least the French have showcased their will to change that policy in regards to the reforms pension, in regards to a certain number of necessity towards the security agenda, and on, of course, foreign policy. The second difficulty of Michel Barnier is to find allies, as Michel Barnier is dependent and comes from a very weakened political force. The liberal Republicans only represent 47 MPs. As everyone knows, to have a majority, you need 289 MPs. So his difficulty will be to find compromise amongst the political forces willing to sustain his government, and therefore enter potentially in this government. The third difficulty is to find a way to avoid the censorship, which has already been proposed or promised by the major political forces. The Socialist Party has said it would censor Michel Barnier. The Insoumission Party of Jean-Luc Mélenchon has said the same thing. And the last but not least, Rassemblement National is waiting for the discourse of general policy that Michel Barnier should be taking if, and that is, and the last point, the National Assembly is gathered before the 1st of October, as this is the date that normally is the entry or the departure of the new mandate.
And Emmanuel, I mean, a lot of people at the time described Macron's decision to hold these snap elections as quite a big gamble. Doesn't necessarily seem from what you're saying that it's going to pay off. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit more about the impact this is having on ordinary French people and on the ability to govern the country.
Well, precisely, the country is not governable, and that is the major odd and the major stake that Michel Barnier has to overcome. Michel Barnier, as I mentioned, is a liberal coming from the Republican Party, a conservative party, but this is not precisely the vote which was showcased during the snap elections after the European elections of the 7th of July. Second point is to say that Emmanuel Macron has made a gamble to try to continue his policy, but changing the people who are going to be in charge of putting that policy. The question of the names is important, but it's not the most important. Will Michel Barnier have his own policy, or will Michel Barnier pursue the reforms, the policies that Gabriel Attal and his former government has put in emphasis? The reform of the pensions reform, the question of the security, the immigration law that has to come again at the National Assembly when it will be restarting the 1st of October. And last but not least, and I think the most important and the next challenge, is the vote of the budget, as we have to have this vote in the first days of October if we want to have a stabilized budget for the year 2025.
It's a lot at stake then. Emmanuel Dupuy joining us from Paris. Thank you so much for that insight.